Hello and welcome to the PocketGamer.biz podcast week in mobile games, where we discuss the big news of the week and provide some insights. I'm Craig Chapple, head of content at PocketGamer.biz, and with me today is Paige Cook, deputy editor. Welcome back, Paige.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I've missed a few. I've been ill.
Oh, it's been going around definitely in the UK, and I think basically everywhere in the world. I think everyone I know, even the streamers that I watch, they're getting
Everybody's sick.
they're getting ill. But other than being ill, what have you been up to?
Mm, Not a whole lot because I've been ill. There's been like a lot of games that have come out this month, so I've been trying to chip away at those. But yeah, it's been a little bit rough with not feeling too well. But I'm better now, and I've got some family visiting this weekend, which is nice because I don't live like close to any of my family. So my dad and one of my sisters is coming for a visit, so I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, that's really lovely. It's always nice to see the family, especially when they're far away.
Yeah.
My mum lives in Liverpool, so uh, to get a cheap train, it takes about 4.5 hours or something there. Unless you want to
Yeah.
pay like £120.
Trains are literally crazy now. We looked at because I'm all the way in like the north of England and my partner's family is all the way in the south. And we were like, oh, we'll go for like one Christmas, and it was something like £350 for one ticket. We were like, no, we won't go.
Yeah, yeah. If people don't know, in the UK, it's insane. Like it's cheaper. Like you could probably fly for less. You could probably
Yeah,
like fly to, I don't know, Spain, go from Spain to the closest airport, and it'd probably be cheaper. Especially
which
if
is
it's like
really
from just like
terrible, really. It's like, yeah, just fly instead of getting a train.
yeah, it's mental. Yeah, but that's how we deal with climate change. So make public transport more expensive, unless it's a plane. Anyway, well, that sounds like yeah. Well, it sounds like you can have a lovely weekend. So, I'm glad you're feeling better.
Yeah.
I've uh, I've also been a bit ill. I've not been up to too much, but I watched the film Don't Move on Netflix. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah, I think I've seen it. Yeah, because it sounds
It
familiar.
it was all right actually. So the premise, I don't think I'm spoiling it. It's literally at the name. The premise is I won't give any of it, but like there's how can I explain this without any spoilers? There's a woman, and then she gets kind of kidnapped, and she gets injected with something, and basically for the rest of the film, she can't move. She covers a surprising amount of distance for someone that can't move. like, but I actually quite enjoyed it. It's just an hour and a half. It's quite easy to watch. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it wasn't bad, especially for a Netflix film. But we haven't had the chance to connect about Alien Romulus properly. So
Yes.
I mentioned on the podcast weeks ago. I've watched it myself and Paige. We're big fans of Alien. I thought it was really good. Uh, but I mean, I think I've just sort of become, admittedly, obviously I'm not like raging on forums or messaging creators, but I think I've just probably become a toxic fan of the franchise. Like it will never be good enough for me. I've realised whatever they do, I'm pretty
I
sure
feel
it'll
like
just
that's
never be
always
good.
going to be the case now. If like the first
Yeah,
or the second film is your favorite, that's it now. There's never going to
yeah.
be a better one. It's those.
And so I think they did some stuff really well. The facehugger stuff was fantastic. I think that just the story was really simple but pretty good. They bring in some, again, it's spoilers, isn't it? I don't know. They bring in stuff from other films, like story elements. That's a bit like, I wish you didn't bother. It's like the midichlorians in Star Wars. It's like, actually, don't do that, please. Just keep it a bit more mysterious. You don't have to. And then I was saying the other week, the thing that I really didn't like though, well, it was just the because every film in a franchise, the longer a franchise gets, the more nods they have to do to the classics, and then there's just this stupid scene where one of the characters is like, "Get away from her, you," etc. And I just like just wink at the camera. Might as well, like,
I feel like that scene is so weird because half the people I talk to, this I'm part of this half, like I just found it a little bit cringy, and I was like, oh
yeah,
no, like you didn't need to go there. And the other half were like, oh, that was so cool. I was like, was it? I thought it was a bit like, oh no.
I hated that bit. It just totally pulls you out as well. You're like, all right, yeah.
Yeah,
It's,
because I
it's
know
fun.
this sounds stupid, but it makes you realize you're watching a film. Like it
Yeah,
completely
no, I
pulls you out of the immersion. You're like, oh right, yeah, wink.
totally agree. What did you think of the film?
Liked it. I think it's the best like modern alien film that we've got.
Yeah, it's not
So
hard.
that's a big compliment because it's been a bit rocky. But yeah, I don't think anything will ever beat one or two for me. But
Yeah,
maybe that's
same.
just like it. That just is what it is. But yeah, I really liked it. I thought it was good.
Competing against modern alien films isn't difficult, and one of them is basically Alien versus Idiots. That's one of my friend's favorite films. I'm furious with him every time I hear about it or think about it. It's like, Prometheus, really? Oh, so bad.
I feel
So
like it might have been an okay film if it wasn't part of the alien world.
but wasn't it the premise of that film? I'm sure in the scripting phase, so it started off not being an Alien prequel,
Mm,
which makes
yeah, that
sense.
would make sense. Yeah.
And then it becomes an Alien prequel. I think it's okay to do spoilers now. If anyone doesn't want to spoiler, skip, I don't know, 20 seconds ahead. But there's the bit. So the twist in the film is that is it Mr. Wayland himself is on the ship.
Yeah.
Why is that a twist? It's his ship. He's allowed. It's just like why why not just say I'm on the ship? Like it's mine. I'm paying for this. Hated it. Sorry again. Toxic fan. Anyway, right. Well, we'll move on. I'll stop talking about Alien. I'll have to start a podcast on that. So before we get on to the news, got a few shout outs as usual. So Pocket Gamer Connects Jordan is just over a week away, November 9th and 10th. Obviously, still chance to register if people want to go. I'll be reporting on the ground from Amman next week by the Dead Sea. In fact, so very much look forward to that. And then, of course, we've got Pocket Gamer Connects London, January 20th and 21st, our biggest show of the year. Always looking forward to that one. So yeah, if you want to speak there, please fill out the speaker form. If you want to attend, yeah, grab a ticket. Early birds are available currently. And you're going to go anyway, probably, right? So you should get your ticket. Well, it's cheap, but that's never how anyone does things. It's just like, no, I'll do it last minute. Right, so enough of that then. We'll get straight to the news. So there's quite a lot to cover this week. One of the stories I wanted to cover, because I didn't actually mention it last week, but I was talking about how everything is a games platform, and I constantly talk about is the games. I used to think it was going to be like a really big thing, especially on chat apps. Didn't turn out to be the case in the West anyway. And then suddenly there's a headline. Literally, you could pull it, and I checked. You could pull this from 2018. Facebook Instagames finally gets in-app purchases, and I wrote that exact headline, or I think it was me, one of the team in 2018. The difference is this time it is on iOS. You see, and when I look back at the original story, it was like, oh, so in-app purchases are available on Android, and then there was the issue with that where both Facebook and Google tried to take their own 30% each, which was obviously ridiculous. So now you kind of flash forward 6.5 years later, and it's you can do in-app purchases natively in iOS, and they were exploring that. That's it. They were 6.5 years ago. They said we're exploring like other platforms, i.e., iOS. So it took that long to get it, and then Alexander Krug, who's the CEO at Soft Games, is kind of calling it a game changer for instant games, which is kind of a fair assessment. I think it's kind of a fair assessment. You know, that means he's saying that you can do different kinds of experiences now. You can probably scale those games differently and better. So you could do ad monetization before, or you could only do in-app purchases through like the browser. But now you're actually kind of more of a level playing field with other native apps. So there's a lot more interesting things you could do, even though user acquisition is broken. But maybe it's a bit different with instant games. I'm not sure what the revenue share is. I'll figure that out for the next show. But yeah, that whole story I found fascinating. Total blast from the past. We'll see how it does. I think it's really fascinating. It kind of feeds into the whole, and Paige, you're kind of looking into this at the moment, the whole HTML5 web gaming space that's kind of rising again, and it makes you realize just how prohibitive Apple and Google's App Store rules have been, and actually for the longest time, they've probably been stifling. To sound like I'm in marketing or an executive somewhere, they've been stifling innovation generally, I guess, across the internet because the main funnel, I guess, is through mobile, and they've limited what you can do there. So it's a real sign that the app stores are opening up, being forced to, and now what the opportunities are going to be. Elsewhere, Supercell has invested in Barcelona studio Penguin Armada. They are a PC first studio. They're from previous Omnidrone developers. So that was a company that was acquired by Scopely in 2022. They're working on a top-down PvP 3v3 the few things there game, and their CEO Gerard Fernandez said they want to create highly accessible, solid, balanced, and intuitive full co-op mechanics that are both enjoyable and rewarding. We're going to speak to the team a bit more about, try and get a bit more of an idea about what they're doing. They can say how much investment they've raised, or now at the moment is Supercell is their main backer. But that's an interesting one to watch. Slightly more depressing news. Fingersoft, which makes the hill climb racing games, and they did Lego Hill Climb Adventures earlier this year. They have laid off 14 staff, and they blamed a substantial decline in ad revenue. They said that these reductions weren't tied to any specific project, but were said to spread across the company. Because of that kind of substantial decline, adjustments to its cost structure became essential to preserve its competitiveness and secure the company's long-term success. I feel like you're gonna touch upon some of this stuff. We kind of I don't know. I feel like we had like a few months where things kind of felt like they're getting better. Obviously, mass layoffs last kind of couple of years, and now as we get towards the end of the year, I just feel like I'm hearing so much again about closures and layoffs. There's definitely some like even in media at the moment. There's a few going around. And so
Yeah, it did seem like there was almost like a month where we didn't really talk about layoffs as much, and now it
yeah.
seems like it's all picked back up again. So, yeah, it's sort of that thing where you kind of feel like, oh, it's finally coming to an end, and then there's more.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully it gets better, before the holidays, and no one gets laid off around then. But I guess we'll see. So elsewhere, Tencent has denied rumors of its own layoffs and restructuring, but it has acknowledged that a number of key personnel changes have taken place at the company, including the departure of Vice President Zheng Yu. A representative told Yakai that rumors about large-scale changes are untrue and that no specific optimization plan for the Timi Studio Group team is in place. In fact, it's hoping to hire new talent. The statement was made in response to rumors that 20% of Timi's workforce were being laid off, in addition to 30% of the Lightspeed employees developing a Power World-like mobile game. I don't think that means necessarily the Power World team. I think that's just how we refer to that. Apparently, Tencent has already laid off 5,500 employees in 2022. I guess Tibby is already also currently working. Obviously, they're the team behind Honor of Kings. They've done Call of Duty Mobile, and they are working on, can't remember what it's called, the new Honor of Kings game, the big open world tile. I think it's going to release next year. Yeah, and no one is. Well, actually, I guess according to Tencent, nothing happened. I mean, how do you hear that 20% of people have been laid off? Like, as a reporter, you hear people have been laid off. You get the number 20%, and then you get told nothing's happened.
Like something's happened.
Yeah, I find those things interesting, and then they're already admitting that, oh yeah, no, there have been some personnel changes. Whatever. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it's not true. Maybe they define it differently. Obviously, news: China has approved 128 new games, but the most interesting for me was one of those included Supercell Squad Busters. So obviously, you need a license to get game launches in China now. It's probably a bit easier for Supercell, with their owner being the aforementioned Tencent. Curious how Squad Busters does in China. It's still, I think there was like a mini recovery for Squad Busters, and it's kind of declined again. So the Supercell really kind of struggling currently. It's still early-ish days to turn that around. I think they would have expected a much bigger launch, especially for their expectations. Kind of as we discussed before, really. I'm not sure a China launch will help massively. I'm sure if it released, as soon as it releases, you'll see like a massive revenue spike, and then as always, it will just plunge. I think I was looking at some random games for revenue, and on that Magic, like even and it still makes massive amounts of money, so they're not. I'm sure they're not that worried. But like Dungeon Fighter Mobile, probably the biggest game launch of the year in China, is declining quite a lot. It's still making an incredible amount of money, and this is only App Store revenue. I think if we see, it's had a massive launch in China, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a success. Nice to have all that money, of course, but long term. Lastly on my list, Rollic has soft launched its Barbie Merge mystery mobile game in the UK. So they announced it earlier this year. It's like I think it's like one of those. It's like narrative driven. It's like puzzle decorate kind of thing. That's the avenue they're going down. I don't know what to think of it. It's like, okay, yeah, merge is big at the moment. Like when we were covering the top 50, you kind of saw that Travel Town from Magmatic Games, I want to say, and and I'm forgetting the name. I think it's Seaside Escape and another one from, really testing my memory here, Merge Fun, something like that, Microfun. They're now like the kind of the dominant players in the merge space, ahead of Metacore, which still does well from Merge Mansion. So I guess Zinger Rollic want to get in more on that area. Obviously, Zinger generally has experience with Gram games and Merge Dragons. But anyway, I don't know. I don't know I don't really know the fit, Barbie. It's the art style that kind of gets me. I'm obviously not the target audience, but I just don't really. I don't know. When I look at it, I'm just like, oh, I don't know if you've seen it, Paige. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I've seen it. I also don't think I'm the target audience for that.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't get it. So that is it for my section of the news. But Paige, you've got a few big stories. What do you got?
Yeah, first up is a little bit about Animal Crossing Pocket Camp. I think we did talk about this on the podcast maybe a few weeks back. Just the fact that the free-to-play version was stopping and that it was going to go premium, which is happening now. So the free version will end at the end of November on the 28th, and then it goes premium shortly after on December the 3rd. And I know we kind of discussed that, like, was it like kind of like a good idea? Like, if your free game is coming to an end, and inevitably sometimes these live games they do just sort of fizzle out, is it a good idea to, make it premium? I guess it's another way that they get to have a second wave of income from it. And I think I mentioned how like it might even be a, not maybe a direct way of doing it, but kind of like a way of preserving it. At least players can still play that game and they don't lose all of the things that they've had for all of these years. Um, but essentially, they're not they're not just taking the free version and putting it straight as a premium game. They're putting a few new things in it. I think it's essentially like taking one thing out, which is their leaf tokens, which I guess was like a live thing for the game, and they're then putting something new in to replace that. But they're putting some new features in. I think there's a whole new location in it, and how they would have like their yearly events. They're still sort of incorporating that into the game, so it almost feels like the game isn't just stale, like it's just one thing. So it is interesting that they haven't essentially just took the free version, took all of the live elements out of it, made it premium, and that's it. So yeah, I just thought that, it's not really what I was expecting. It's a good thing, but yeah, I was kind of expecting them to just put it over there. Maybe it's a bit of extra cash, I guess, but I guess for some people it's still a shame that the live version won't continue, but I do think this is kind of as good as it could get for an alternative.
Yeah, I think this is pretty interesting idea. I mean, they're not going to make much money at all from doing this, but it's good for the fans. And it keeps it's like game preservation, right? Keeps stuff going. And I don't know if you just said the one thing that I think is going to be missing is you can't visit someone else's camp.
Yeah, I don't think you can do sort of that live aspect of visiting other people, which I
Mm.
guess is a shame. But I don't know, is there many other games that have been free and then they stopped their free version and went premium? I can't really think of one off the top of my head. Like, it's a strange concept that I don't really think I've come across before.
Yeah, maybe I can't think of one. Usually, you hear
Hmm.
about like a premium on maybe different platforms, but like a premium game going free to play,
Yeah.
like a PUBG or something, but not the other way around. But yeah, no, kudos to Nintendo. Interesting idea.
Yeah, I'd be intrigued to see how much it does sell. But like I said, I'm not expecting anything massive. It's more just of a it's an interesting way of flipping your live game, I guess. Um, but second story from me is it's a big one. So Sony has closed its mobile studio Neon Koi. They were working on an action mobile game, but obviously that's now cancelled. In addition to this closure, they also shut Firework, which is the studio behind Concord, which I'm sure most people in games know about Concord, the PvP shooter that just it was kind of a massive failure for them, really. But as for Neon Koi, they used to go by Savage Game Studios, but they were acquired back in 2022. They underwent this sort of rebrand, but it's kind of not been great for them this whole time. They lost their CEO, they lost their general manager, so it's not been a great run, and ultimately it's now led to the studio closing. Apparently, the decision comes down to an evaluation of the potential of this mobile game that they were working on and whether it would meet the expectations and kind of the standard of what they're looking for a Sony and PlayStation type game. And I guess it wasn't what they wanted it to be. In the statement, they said, obviously, the usual. We appreciate all the hard work, but that they want games to be in line with PlayStation Studios pedigree, which I don't know. I kind of feel like that's a feels like a little bit of a low blow, but it is what it is. And despite this closure, they're still saying that mobile is a priority for their growth, which I'm not really sure I'm seeing that anywhere. But obviously, they've got their Destiny game that's going to be mobile, so see how that does. But outside of that, not a whole lot going on. And I know we had a story today as well that the CWA they had kind of criticised these closures, and they sort of went along the lines of saying about how they're trying to build their monopoly, and we mentioned in our morning call it's a weird way to build a monopoly to close studios and shut down games. I'm not quite sure I understand that angle on it, but yeah, bit of a weird one.
Yeah, maybe I've just totally misunderstood what the CWA is talking about. Yeah, I didn't really get it.
Can't really find the point in it. Like I guess the official statement is with the whole trying to keep it in line with PlayStation's pedigree,
Hmm.
and obviously talking about how strong their exclusives are. So maybe they just felt like this doesn't match with our portfolio. It's not to a standard that it's maybe not great, but I get it. But yeah, the whole monopoly thing, I'm not. That's the comment from um that side of things. So yeah, I don't really see that. I get the point that you're making though.
The I don't know why it also reminds me that once I was told that EA kind of bought one of the reasons that EA bought Respawn at the time. Well, I think they were working closely together anyway, but they were kind of pushed into it because Nexon wanted to buy them. So I don't, again, it's kind of like, oh, well, we better get it before someone else does, and then you
Even
close
if we
it.
don't do anything with it, we've got that, and nobody else can do anything with it.
Well, you just don't want your rivals to have it, I guess. If
Yeah.
especially if you're working with them. Interesting. But I want to touch upon that. The thing you kind of, as you kind of said, the when they're like, oh, mobile remains a priority growth area for the company, and they're in the very early stage of our mobile efforts. So they've been looking at mobile for a long time, like in different ways. Like Sony, I mean, within Sony Music, they have a hugely successful game in Fate Grand Order, kind of Sony Music Aniplex stuff. But as far as the actual PlayStation business goes, there's totally not really got anywhere with it. Remember, they released like an Uncharted game years ago. They used to have
I forgot
Sony,
about that.
yeah, they used to have Sony Forward Works, PlayStation Mobile. They kind of released some quirky games. I don't think that exists anymore. The Neon Koi, the Savage Game Studios was the acquisition was, I don't know. It's just, I think they had like the talent, but which was proven. But then as a studio, they hadn't actually released anything yet. So why did they kind of purchase that? I guess they saw some potential in a game that they were working on in the team. And now, the Destiny mobile game. The thing is that surely that mobile game has been in development since before Sony's acquisition, because the tie with NetEase, that invested 100 million into Bungie years ago, most likely to make a mobile version of that IP. Like, what else? Maybe they are secretly. I don't know. But what else are they really working on that's going to come to mobile? I have my significant doubts that Sony really cares at all about mobile gaming, unless it's a partnership to get a game released in China.
It's kind of a weird comment to make because if they don't want to do mobile or they're really not that interested in it, that's fine. Like obviously you're
Yeah,
focused on console, so it's an odd comment to make if actually there's not that much interest in that area.
yeah. I endlessly fascinates me these massive companies, whether it's platform holder or a big publisher, that just kind of seem pressured into, oh, well, we better have a mobile division because it's the fastest growing sector, or it was, etc. And then they finally do it. Like EA bought Glue for $2 billion, even though they don't care really about mobile. Obviously, FIFA's done well, but it's just like, why? Why did you do that? Like in the end, why did you do that? You just pressured into it. Like, did you have a full-on strategy for this? And then Glue Mobile just doesn't really seem to. Please, someone correct me. It just doesn't seem to actually exist anymore. They've closed a bunch of games. I think some of their hit games are now, nowhere near as big as they used to be at Glue. Obviously, you've got the foundations for a mobile business there. Maybe that has helped elsewhere, but yeah, sometimes, yeah, like to your point, it's just you don't need to. If you don't really care about it, just don't bother. Just focus on what you're good at.
Yeah, so one final one from me, a bit of a quicker one. Just that Monument Valley 2 is now out on Netflix, and I love these games, so I felt like I just wanted to talk about Monument Valley really. So yeah, the first and second game are on Netflix now, so obviously if you've got your subscription, you can play it for free, and then this is essentially to set up the December the 10th is the release of Monument Valley 3, which will be exclusive to Netflix. I just think it's interesting that obviously these games before they were like premium titles and they were tied to Apple Arcade, and it's interesting to see the shift into they're now just they're fully with Netflix, but it does make sense. They obviously had their partnership with Netflix and us two did Desta, The Memories Between, so that kind of makes sense. They had that partnership. Now they're doing this. Yeah, I just really like these games, and I think it's kind of a fitting home for them, and it's nice to see these games have a place that does work for them. Um, I would be really interested because obviously it is like quite a popular like few games. I would be intrigued if anyone would actually buy, like someone who doesn't have a Netflix subscription, would they buy one even if it's just for the month just to play the new Monument Valley?
I
I
mean, they
feel like
might. I don't
I
know.
feel
I
like they would
mean,
because you could get it for a month, play the game, and then cancel it.
I think the issue is just with one and two. I guess the issue is like the issue. If you're a subscriber, it's great. It's probably a small part of a reason to keep your subscription going. Even though I think we kind of touched on it last week with subscriptions in general. You kind of keep those subscriptions rolling anyway. Don't like you don't really think about it too much until one day you're like, I haven't actually watched anything for a few months. Like it takes a long time to like actually actively cancel a subscription. But like I think Monument Valley 3 coming up, that could be like people that want that could spend a bit of money, just even if it was just a month, just to get that and play it. Because ultimately I know the market's moved on generally from premium, although we've had some discussions about that on this as well recently. Monument Valley is such a big IP and a beloved one, and the previous games have sold well. That yeah, I think it would actually tempt people to finally a game that would tempt people to buy Netflix. So we're going to move on to the week in views section, and you've got one of everyone's favorite legal tussles at the moment. Yeah, where have you got?
We have spoke about this on the podcast before, but now we've got actual legal people talking about it. So I feel like I can revisit it and just put the legal stuff on them rather than us constantly being like, "I'm not a lawyer."
Yeah, yeah,
But yeah, basically it's the Nintendo and the Pokemon Company. They're filing a lawsuit against creators of Power World, Pocket Pair. Um, so we discussed it before that obviously you would think that if they were going to file a lawsuit, it would be on a copyright infringement because obviously you look at the two games and it is kind of glaringly obvious that yes, these games look very similar. The Pals and the Pokemon, they look similar, but it's actually really hard legally to win something like that because like in art, things can look similar and they can be inspired by, but unless it's an absolute carbon copy of something, technically you could just say that, oh, well, it's inspired by and it's incidental. And that's something that Futura in this feature that we had on the site this week, that's what they kind of point out. So they were like, it's obviously intentional that they've decided to not go down that route, but instead they're going with filing against one of the patents that they've got. And we touched on this because they still haven't said which one it is that they're filing for. But Futura, like they did a little bit of digging on some of the ones that they do own. And this just kind of blows my mind because I know like I think Craig, you mentioned last time when we spoke about it, like a few other video games that have filed these before, like the Shadow of War, the Lord of the Rings games, like their Nemesis system, they filed that. And now nobody's ever used it. So that kind of feels like a total waste. But some of these ones for Pokemon, it's just like I'll read one of them. So obviously this might not be what they're doing, but one of them is someone can transition between ground and air movement. The patent explains if the automatic switching of a character from the air to the ground or vice versa. Like I could probably think of 100 games that surely, like obviously there might be more if you were to read the full thing. Maybe it's more in depth, but just a few of them you read it and you're kind of like, well, couldn't you apply this to lots of other games? I know originally there was speculation that maybe they had a patent for the fact of like having a device, so a Pokeball that you throw at something and it captures obviously a Pokemon. Maybe that's what it was, but I think I mentioned that, other games do that. Ark Survival has something that you throw the ball at a dinosaur, the dinosaur goes in the ball, you throw the ball, the dinosaur pops out. So I think I just find it a really weird one. And as much as obviously Nintendo are huge, Pokemon Company huge, and I'm sure they've got an army of great lawyers, but I feel like even going this route, it still must be a really hard win. And in the feature from Futura, who are do actually have legal expertise, unlike us, they've even said that like this is going to be a tough one for them to win because essentially you would have to prove that the mechanic that they're using is exactly the same. Like there can't be one missing feature from it because if there is, they can essentially say, it's different, even though it's super close to it. So yeah, I kind of wonder if there's going to come a point where they're like, do we just give up? Because also since Power Worlds came out, I'm now seeing more games that are saying, oh, we're a Power World like game. So it's kind of like, where does it end? So if they sue Power World, do you then sue all of these games that are kind of copying Power Worlds? And it sort of just seems like one of those ones that could spiral into something bad. And if they were to win, then I don't know. There's probably about 1,000 other games out there you should be filing lawsuits against because yeah, I don't know. Some of these things they just sound like, well, aren't they in a bunch of other games?
yeah. I think the thing I do know is that if you want to keep, well, at least copyright, like if you want to keep these things, you have to, in every single infringement that you know about, you have to basically start legal action or warn people not to do it. Otherwise, because you can't pick and choose like what your patent. Sorry, you can't pick and choose who's infringing your patent. It has to be like kind of carte blanche everyone. So that's interesting. Are they picking and choosing or not? But but I think it's just been like, reported people saying that Nintendo, when it's filed this kind of lawsuit, they've never lost. So
Mm.
I mean they've got something, right? They must have something pretty. Who knows in the end? But you know,
Yeah, I suppose that's the part that we can only speculate because they still haven't said which thing it is that they're filing. And even
yeah,
Pocket Pair have said, We don't know. Like, we don't know what they've said that we have used. So I suppose it will come down to that. And if it's something very specific that they have used, maybe they could win. But if it's any of sort of the ones that we have been able to see that they have, I just feel like not that they couldn't win, but if they do, it just seems like there's definitely other games that also use these exact same mechanics.
mm,
So for me, it's just interesting of like where does it stop? Because you've got games coming out that are now more like Power World. So if you're suing them, not that you want them suing everyone, but like you said, you're technically not allowed to just pick and choose. Like, oh, they've actually been quite successful, so we'll do a
mm.
lawsuit against those guys, but not bother with anybody else.
Yeah. I can't wait really until all the stuff actually starts coming out about it,
I think
about
it will
all
be
the
an
actual
interesting
details.
one.
All right, thanks for that, Paige. So for my week of views, I just wanted to go through a few takeaways from Supercell's Games First Helsinki event. Um, Now I haven't watched it for a couple of years, so I've been there. I think a couple times years ago. They've held it at different venues, I think. Well, definitely when I went, it was a different venue. I don't know. The way they did the show this year was just seemed a bit insane, but I kind of love it in the sense that it's very like I've not been to Slush, but I've been told just how bombastic it is, and you can see the stage, like how it's just very dramatic. And you like the stage looks incredible. The lighting's just kind of bonkers, and then they had you got the two hosts coming out treating it like a proper like TV show or something, like almost like an awards show, just without the awards. It was just it was interesting, like style wise, how they did it. It's definitely, I guess, it does add a bit more. I don't know. I hate to use the word, a bit more pizzazz to proceedings rather than here's the next speaker. you know, yeah, that's cool. There's a few talk. I think they had a few great speakers. They had Trip Hawkins, former EA CEO and the founder there. Astute Games game director and director of Monument Valley 3, Jennifer Astaris. And there's some really good talks. So I just wanted to go through some of the takeaways. So I'll link an article in the description for these. Trip Hawkins had some good points to make, mostly on broken business models, which I found fascinating. And he kind of, some of the things he talks about are kind of things you already know. And one of the things he said was the fact that 98% of players don't spend any money in mobile games. He said that is actually kind of a rejection, I guess, of mobile. And he said one of the reasons for that is that the platforms of these walled gardens are taking a 30% revenue share. Again, we've all discussed. But I guess like this is something you know, but when someone just tells you the number, you're like, oh yeah, okay. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about how rules by Apple and Google make things so much more difficult to kind of innovate or do anything new or really do any. It's just really impactful on developers and then users. So he said, if I want to get €1 from the customer, I have to charge the customer $1.43. You then take 30% of that. That's 43%. That's 43 cents. So that's what Apple, Android, or Sony, if you're looking at other platforms, would get. And then I get the dollar I was looking for. But you as a consumer had to pay 43% more money. And then it's like, if you think the most recent years of inflation are bad, how about 43%? So that is a serious, serious problem. Hard to disagree. with that. He said some other interesting things. He kind of talks about his how most of the game things we already know. Most of the games, top grossing games, cross platforms are just games that probably haven't been released within the last year. You could push back on that a little bit, where on mobile there's actually been some surprise successes. We talked about some emerge games earlier that are doing pretty well, not like massive scale. The last year you've had Dungeon Fighter Mobile. I appreciate that is a massive IP, so of course it's going to do well. And then you've had like Last War, Whiteout Survival. You've got all these games that are actually doing pretty well and kind of breaking in. And every now and again you get a new big one, but you can, yeah. Within the top 100, many of those have been out for many, many years. But one of his interesting points, which I can't remember if I said earlier, but he goes on to kind of future forecasts, and he talks about one of the things he talks about is like government pressure on those 30% taxes. He said browser gaming offers a great opportunity for developers. He goes on to say, I believe browser crossplay with HTML5 and WebGL, I think that's one of the next waves. New hills to go after. It's not really crowded. Right now, you can't really think of a leading company that's doing that, period. I'm sure someone could, but to his point, there's definitely a big space that developers can go into. So that was a really fascinating talk. All of this is actually on Supercell's YouTube channel. You can see the whole live stream that is still on there. So if you're interested in seeing kind of the whole talk, definitely check that out. I'll quickly run through just some of the other interesting talks that they did. So I mentioned Jennifer Astara. She took the stage to kind of talk about the illusion of iteration. But I just really love kind of, she goes through, like, for example, Monument Valley to the Lost Forest, which was part of the Playing for the Planet Green Game Jam. And they go through kind of the different iterations of the art styles that they were trying to go for. And it's just really fascinating to see how you how you start with all these various things, and then slowly, surely you kind of get to where you think you want to be. So she, one of her quotes was, think about iteration as a tool for transformative change, not just tiny refinements. And maybe not as risky as Wild Leap. You can still do those, but think about also including sea change. Jam it to your course, which means game jam, just kind of prototyping stuff. And playtest to confirm. She later added, sometimes you end up going back to the drawing board. That's okay. Embrace the uncertainty of iteration, but also see through its many illusions. Persist and resist. Another really great talk. There was a talk. I am not an artistic person really at all, but I do appreciate how people, because I just don't have in terms of like drawing art, I just don't have a single bone in my body that's good at this. So when I see other people talking about it and they're really good at it, I'm like, that's amazing. Like, how do you do this? And then, so there was obviously that talk, and then Supercell game artist Fernanda Oliveira, she works on Brawl Stars. She gave an excellent talk about the creative pillars of how they create all the characters, which I just thought was really fascinating. It was basically the main takeaway, to distill it, was basically think about the character first. You know, who are they? Like, what's their story? And then from that, you can kind of build out what they look like, and then you get a lot more personality that comes out. I just thought that was generally a fascinating talk. But if you want to know the 5 pillars, I won't go through them all now, but read the article. But they were basically, if they make sense out of context, humor creates connection. So using humor, which was really interesting. I think one of the ways they use humor, I think the character's called Shade, basically had like ghost mechanics, but there's no magic in Brawl Stars. So how do you make a ghost in that context? So Fernando Rivera, she thought like, oh, what about like the clothes you have dumped in the corner of your bedroom? And at night you see it for a moment, you're like, oh, that's quite scary. Oh, that's just the clothes. And then they kind of came up with, well, what if there's like a character like eyes, and so now this character just has like a jacket, a cap, glasses. I think that was kind of the inspiration. So humor. And then they can kind of get a lot more from that. It was interesting. Nostalgia. Everything does nostalgia these days. Diversity. She just has some really interesting thoughts on how you actually do that meaningfully. iconic simplicity. So I think basically that means instead of having a character with like 100 items on their clothing to explain every single thing about their history, like you might see in a Zack Snyder film. She didn't say Zack Snyder, that's just me. Um, it's like, well, less is more. And so I think the less you have, maybe you get more out of the character. That was really interesting. And then Timeless Tribute was the last one. And just a quick quote. She said, "Creating with legacy in mind is precisely that. When we're creating, we're almost leaving this Bible for the next generation that will for sure inspire them in everything they will create," which I thought was a nice quote. And then lastly, very quickly, so there was a couple panels about emerging markets and Latin America, Africa, and India. Basically, just kind of going into the opportunities. Studio Bando CEO and creative director Juan Castaneda said it was a very exciting time for the Latin America's games industry. Mario Games founder Hugo Obi, he said there's a lot of opportunity in Africa, like a lot of the population's quiet. Oh, and Letty Art CEO co-founder Iram Toya said the same thing. Like there's a young population, and there's like a lot of opportunities to kind of tap into that in the coming years. So definitely check out those as well. But yeah, it was a really interesting event. They do it every year. Hopefully, it comes back to London as well. But yeah, no, it was a good show. I enjoyed that. So that brings us to the end of the PocketGamer.biz podcast week in mobile games. Thanks very much, Paige, for joining on this one.
Yeah, it's good to be back.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll catch you next week. See you then.